Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Taanis Daf Lamed discusses primarily the prohibitions of Erev Tisha B'Av and the Sudas HaMafsekes, the last meal before we begin the fast of Tisha B'Av. We will discuss the prohibitions of eating meat, drinking wine, when you actually have to start fasting, and changing the minhagim of the Suda. And then the Gemara will bring a list of brisas, a chain one after the other of brisas discussing these halachos. And the Gemara will teach about the practice of some Tanaim and how they used to deal with Erev Tisha B'Av. So the Gemara first quotes from the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said that on Erev Tisha B'Av, a person should not eat two tavshilin, should not have two cooked foods, only one cooked food. So the Gemara says that Rav Yehuda says that this is only limited by two things. It's only true by Sudas HaMafsekes, and it's only true after Chatzos. So this limitation of having only one cooked dish only applies if you have both those things. It's after Chatzos on Erev Tisha B'Av, and it's Sudas HaMafsekes. If it's before Chatzos, even if it's Sudas HaMafsekes, or if it's Sudas HaMafsekes, but it is before Chatzos, or if it's not Sudas HaMafsekes, even if it's after Chatzos, you may eat more than one cooked dish. The Gemara brings a brisa that says both of these halachas independently. It has to be after Chatzos, and it has to be the Sudas HaMafsekes. The Gemara brings both halachas in two independent brisas. Now the second brisa also adds other halachos at length. It says, Erev Tisha B'Av, a person should not eat two cooked foods, should not eat meat, should not drink wine. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says he should change from his normal practice. Now, we saw that in our Mishnah as well. And now, Rabbi Yehuda, in this brisa, Rabbi Yehuda explains what does it mean to change from his normal practice. He says, if he normally ate two cooked foods, he should only eat one. If he normally ate with 10 people there joining him, Rashi explains, for his honor, then he should only have 5. If he used to drink 10 cups of wine, he should only have 5. But the brisa explains this is all only true after the 6th hour, after Chatzos. It would be before, then all these things would be permitted. Now the Gemara brings another brisa. This one says, Erev Tisha B'Av, a person should not eat two cooked foods, should not eat meat, should not drink wine. That's according to Rabbi Meir. Chachamim say you should do a little bit different. What does it mean to do a little bit different? Less meat, less wine. And again, what does it mean? If he used to eat a liter of meat, he should eat half a liter of meat. If he used to drink a lug of wine, he should only drink half a lug of wine. If he didn't drink any wine at all, then he's forbidden to drink wine because he cannot make more of a suda than he usually would. Now, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel here adds into halacha. He says if he used to eat at the end of his meal for dessert, if he used to eat radishes or salted meat, that's meat which is preserved and therefore doesn't count as regular meat, so then he's allowed to do that. That's okay, that's not considered a violation. Now, we bring another brisa, and this goes more deeply into the halachos of wine and meat. And it says, any meal that you eat because of Tisha B'Av, if it's a Tisha B'Av related meal, such as Sudas HaMafsekes, it would be forbidden to eat meat or drink wine at that meal. And at that time, it's also forbidden to wash. The Isser Rechitza begins at that point as well. Now, if you have not started a meal that's Tisha B'Av related, like Sudas HaMafsekes, then you're permitted to drink wine, you're permitted to eat meat, and you're permitted to wash. Now, that's the Tanna Kama. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. He says in the name of his father, you're allowed to wash at any time on Erev Tisha B'Av. The Isser washing only begins when the Isser fasting begins. As long as you're allowed to eat, you're allowed to wash. Okay, the Gemara brings another brisa, which gets more generally into the halachos of Tisha B'Av. This brisa says any halacha which applies to an avel, somebody who is mourning because he lost a close relative, and Shiva also applies on a Tisha B'Av. So, besides for the fact the brisa says that it's usher to eat and drink, it's also usher to anoint the body with oils, it's also to wear leather shoes, it's also to have marital relations, it's also to learn Torah, whether it's Torah, Nevi'im, or Ksuvim, Mishnah, Talmud, that's Gemara, Medrash, Halacha, and Gada, all the things are also. What you're allowed to learn is you're allowed to learn something you never learned before, Rashi says, because there's pain in the fact that you don't know it. He's allowed to read something he's never read before, and he's also allowed to read the kinnis of Tisha B'Av. He's allowed to read from Sefer Eov, and from the terrible predictions in Sefer Yirmiyah. Now, children are not allowed to learn either. And the reasons for all these restrictions on learning is that learning brings joy, as it says, the rules of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are straight, and they bring joy to the heart. Now, Rabbi Yehuda argues on one point. He says, even a place you're not familiar with, you never learned before, never read before, you're still forbidden to read from there. It's still Mesamchei Lev, even though you're not familiar with it. And he repeats the other halachos. You're allowed to read Iyov, Kinnis, and the bad parts of Sefer Yirmiyah, and children can't learn, again, because of B'chudei Shem Mesamchei Lev. Okay, now the Gemara goes into the halachos of what is defined as meat. We had said that meat is aser, but if it's salted meat, it's okay. So the Gemara wants to know, what is heavily salted meat? What does that refer to? So the Gemara says that's got to be where it was in its salt, it was preserved in salt, the amount of time that one is allowed to eat a carbon shlamim, which is 2 days and a night in between. And if it's been salted for that length of time, then it's permitted to eat. It's not counted as meat anymore. The Gemara explains because the carbon shlamim uses the term basar there, and therefore it's used to define meat. Now, wine, you're only allowed to drink, it's only forbidden to drink aged wine, but fresh wine, meaning grape juice, that you would be allowed to. The Gemara wants to know, what does aged wine mean? Aged wine means that the fermentation process is finished, which you could tell because as long as the grape juice is fermenting into wine, there's an effervescence to it. The bubbles rise to the surface. As long as that's happening, which the Gemara says is the first 3 days after squeezing, then it is still considered to be grape juice, and you're allowed to drink it. It's not aser. Aged wine is after 3 days of fermentation. The Gemara quotes a brisa which supports this. The brisa says that the iser giloi, the iser to drink exposed wine, because a snake may have drunk from it and put his venom into it, that only applies after 3 days. Within the first 3 days, the bubbling of the wine keeps the snakes away. And that's our indication that it's 3 days long that the bubbles are rising in the wine. All right, now the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav, this is what the Tana of Yehuda bar Eloi used to do erev Tisha B'Av. They would bring him dried out bread with salt, and he would sit between the stove and the oven in a very soot-filled, dirty place of the house, and he would eat the bread and drink with it a little bit of water. And he looked like somebody who was sitting with a relative who died right in front of him as he became an Avel. Okay, now the Gemara moves on to discuss, can you do malacha on a Tisha B'Av? So the Gemara quotes a Mishnah that says, any place in which has the meaning to do malacha on a Tisha B'Av, they're allowed to. Any place which does not have the meaning, they're not allowed to. Talmidei Chachamim, wherever they are, should not do malacha on Tisha B'Av. And Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says a person should conduct himself like a Talmid Chacham. In this respect, you should not be overly humble and say, I'm not a Talmid Chacham. Now, another brisa says, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says that you should always be like a Talmid Chacham in this respect in order to have the proper mourning for Tisha B'Av. Another brisa says, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, anybody who eats and drinks on a Tisha B'Av is as if he's eating and drinking on Yom Kippur. And Kiva says, anybody who does malacha on a Tisha B'Av will not see any bracha, will not see any blessing from it, will not gain from it. Chachamim say, anybody who does malacha on a Tisha B'Av is not mourning for Yerushalayim, and therefore they will not see the joy or the rebuild of Yerushalayim. Those are connected. In order to see the rebuilding and the joy of Yerushalayim, you have to be mourning for Yerushalayim until it happens. Like it says in the Pasuk in Yeshayahu, Simchas Yerushalayim v'giluba kol yaver asisu itam masayis kol masabim balal. The joy will come to those who mourn for it properly. So from there, the brisa says, we learn anybody who's misabel on Yerushalayim, anybody who mourns for Yerushalayim is zoiche v'ro, will merit and see in its joy. Those who do not mourn Yerushalayim will not merit to see in its joy and its rebuild. Another brisa, anybody who eats meat and drinks wine on Tisha B'Av, which Rashi says means erev Tisha B'Av, to them we apply the pasuk in Yecheskel, Vathi Aveinosam Al Atzmaisam, and their sin will be upon them. Okay, now the Gemara goes to the topic of Kfiyas Hamita, turning over the bed, which means to sit on a low surface. You turn the bed upside down so that the legs aren't holding it up, and then it's a low surface. So we had said that Rabbi Yehuda says you have to turn the bed upside down on Erev Tisha B'Av already and begin to sit on a low surface. So Gemara says that the Chachamim said to Rabbi Yehuda, what are you going to do about women who are pregnant and are nursing? They cannot sleep on a low surface that night. So the Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda said that he responds and he says, I didn't say it for them, I only said it to people who can. And we have a brisa that says that Rabbi Yehuda is Maida. Rabbi Yehuda agrees that somebody who can't shouldn't sleep on a low surface, and the Chachamim agree that somebody who can should sleep on a high surface. So Gemara says, well, then there's no machlokes. What's the difference between them? Gemara says the difference between them is other chairs or surfaces besides the bed that you sleep on. Do you need to turn those over as well and sleep on the low part? According to Rabbi Yehuda, you do, and according to the Chachamim, you do not. Says the Gemara, Rava says the halacha is like our Tana, and that Rabbi Yehuda says you have to turn all surfaces over, and the Chachamim did not agree in anything. They did not agree that you have to turn anything over, even the people who could. So therefore, the Gemara rejects the idea that the Chachamim agreed.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.